Good evening, listeners. It's Pint of Comics. I'm Sir John.
Johnny Ganache
is sitting right next to me. It's a 116 episodes.
116.
Yeah,
116. Podcast hitting 100 this week.
Yeah.
216 episodes of Pint of Comics goodness. And it took us this long to get to our special guest on the phone right now.
Yeah, and I don't know why it took me so long, but definitely jumping away from comics for a little bit. We're driving right into the tabletop gaming with Andrew Looney of Looney Labs, who is probably best known for Fluxx, the fantastic card game that I think was introduced in the mid to late 90s. Is that right, Andrew?
Yes, that is correct. Fluxx was invented in 1996, hit the market in 97, so it's been around for decades at this point.
Yeah. And I remember I had a store open at that time. And I recall when Fluxx was first solicited to our stores, and I was like, what is this? This looks different and interesting. And then I missed out on the first order, and then it was really difficult to get because everybody had cleaned out the warehouses, which was...
So you're saying everybody had better business acumen than you?
Than I did. Well, I no longer have the store either, so you started the company in 96.
Right. Well, my wife and I started the company. I have to give all the props to her because, of course, I just invent the games at Looney Labs, which is a big deal. But she runs the company. She's the entrepreneur, really, who wanted to start a company to publish my games. And I've still got ideas, so I keep coming up with things for her to do. But she's really the business czar, as we call her, and she's the one who I defer to in all business-related matters. I just invent the games.
And honestly, we should say at this point, for the listeners that don't know what Fluxx is, because you got to assume that there's somebody out there that's never even heard of the game before.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah.
So would you mind telling everybody what the game is?
Okay, so Fluxx is a game about change. Change means flux, or rather, flux means change. And so every game changes as you play it. We call it the card game of ever-changing rules because the rules for how you play the game will change from one turn to the next. But everything changes. The stuff you have will change. How you win changes. Everything's in a constant state of flux in this game. And so that's why we think it's done so well for us, is that people like the idea of being able to change the rules for a game, and there really are no other games out there that let you do that. And it also means that every game is different. You just never know quite what to expect with a game of Fluxx, and that keeps you on the edge of your seat for the whole game.
Yeah, it certainly does. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah,
many times.
You get some interactive elements too, because like the two versions that I own I think the original Fluxx, where it's all kind of like, for lack of a better word, like generic items on the cards, And then my wife had gotten me the Batman, kind of the animated series version, or the Tim art version. Mm-hmm. And again, it's got the Batman art, and there might be a couple different little things here and there that are different in gameplay. But then we played Monty Python Fluxx one night, John and I and a group of friends, and that added in a whole nother element of I don't remember everything off the top of my head, but like repeating lines and like kind of that kind of stuff. Is that something that you find you try to get into, like these other versions of the games? Like, I don't know, in Pirate Fluxx, do you have to talk like a pirate at any point? Is it like that?
As a matter of fact, you do. There's a rule called talk like a pirate, where if you use a pirate sounding voice, then you get to draw an extra card, and you're encouraged to keep that accent going even when it's not your turn, because if you've been doing so since your last turn, you get 2 extra cards for talking like a pirate, mate.
What would you say is your most popular game? Which out of the Fluxx versions, is there one that is just always off the shelf?
Well, actually, it's always the original. I mean, in any given quarter when we're running our numbers and seeing how a product is done, it might be that, hey, we just brought out a brand new version, Doctor Who Fluxx or something, for example, and then that might be the best seller for some span. But then the original all-purpose sort of vanilla version of Fluxx, regular old Fluxx, will retake that crown. It's always the best seller. And I think that's because even if you start on a specialty version, you're then, let me try the basic game. And so people end up buying that, which is why it's such a great thing for us to be in Target now with those couple of specialty versions, because each of those has a catalog inside telling the consumer about all these other versions, including the original.
I'm pretty sure when I got my first copy of Fluxx, through the catalog, I became interested in Chrononauts.
Oh, yeah.
And I got Chrononauts, and me and my wife played that quite a few times. And that's insane, too. Give everybody Chrononauts, because that game is awesome.
Okay, well, Chrononauts is a time travel card game. And it's kind of, sort of, slightly like Fluxx. Some people kind of compare it. Mostly, I guess, it's just because it's the same designer, and I have a certain kind of style. But in Chrononauts, it's a card game, but it's kind of like a board game, because you'll lay out this grid of cards in the center of the table called the timeline, and they represent the current state of history. And then as time travelers, we can go back in time and change historical events by flipping some of those cards over, which will cause other cards downstream of them to flip over as well, as one thing causes something else to ripple out of existence.
And then the other one, again, you got me, because through that, I think I ended up picking up Loonesy.
Yeah, Lunacy is, you might sort of compare it to that famous Uno game where you're just trying to get rid of all your cards first.
Yeah.
But it's very different because it's a matching game, and what you're trying to do is match one of the cards you have to one of the ones on the table. And what's really cool is that there are no turns. So it's very, very frantic and chaotic as you're trying to find the match first and play it down there before somebody else puts a card down that ruins your ability to play a card. And it also has this kind of roller coaster action in that you'll get to a stage where you can't play, and you'll kind of wait until no one can play. And then everyone will draw a new card to add to their hand because they're stuck, And so that gives you a kind of moment to catch your breath in the otherwise franticness of Lunacy. And like you say, Lunacy, too, has proven itself worth having a bunch of different licenses or themes attached to it, because it's very easy to just switch out the symbols that you're matching up to go after a particular theme.
I was going to ask you, how many different licenses are no longer being printed?
Well, yeah, you mentioned Batman. Actually, that one has just gone into the vault as well, as we call it.
Oh.
Well, we have so many versions.
Yeah.
We just can't really keep them all in print.
Right.
And it's sometimes, we learned this from the Disney company. Sometimes it's better to let things go away for a while so that people want them to come back.
Sure.
And we've got a number of titles that are now in the vault. We did a Back to the Future version of Chrononauts a few years ago. That's in the vault,
really?
As are the regular show and Adventure Time versions of Fluxx, and a couple of others.
Can you unvault that Back to the Future Chrononauts, maybe a copy or so?
No, but I'll tell you what I can do. You can now go to the store and buy a Star Trek version of Chrononauts. It just came out. I'm so thrilled about it. I'm really, really proud of it because I have pulled together references to all the best time travel episodes of Star Trek from all the different series and put them into one epic and amazing timeline. Chrono Trek, Star Trek Chrono Trek, available now.
And you also, if I'm correct, I think I remember reading this a few months ago. Didn't you come out with a TOS and a next generation version of Fluxx as well?
You bet. Not only are there those two and a bridge pack of cards that are designed to allow you to shuffle those together.
Ooh.
But since then, we've released a Deep Space Nine version of Fluxx.
Oh, wow.
And at the moment, in fact, we're in final production on a Voyager version of Fluxx. So, which I think about as far as I'm going to take it. I'm pretty big on all four of those series.
No Enterprise Fluxx? Scott Bakula's looking at you.
I know he is. And Scott, I'm here to tell you that you are in Chrono Trek. There's a Captain Archer card in Chrono Trek, along with some Enterprise references, because there was a lot of time travel on Enterprise.
Yeah, there was.
Somewhere right now, Scott Bakula's saying, oh, boy.
Oh, boy. Very good. Very nice. Yes.
Oh, we're nerds. We're total nerds here.
No, I appreciate that. As obviously a professional nerd, I'm into it.
Speaking of, what got you into the gaming market to go from what's on your website alone that you were working at NASA and then dive headfirst into the pool of gaming?
Well, so I've always been a very creative person, and in college, I found I had an aptitude for writing, and I liked the idea of maybe becoming a writer. But I wanted to have a job, So, so I got a degree in computer science, and I went to work for NASA programming computers. But in my heart of hearts, I still wanted to be a writer, and I wrote a series of short stories that eventually I assembled into a weird little novel called The Empty City. And in that book, I described an imaginary board game played with weird little pyramid game pieces. And that actually is my original claim to fame. You're quite right in saying my biggest success is Fluxx. That's the thing that everybody knows me for. We've sold millions of copies of that. But in a lot of ways, my proudest accomplishment is this board game system that uses these pyramids, which we now call Looney pyramids, and which we've made hundreds, actually, of games have been created for these pyramids over the last 20, 30 years. More than 35 I have designed myself. And a couple of years ago, we put a big box set, a comprehensive collection of these pyramid games together called Pyramid Arcade, which is everything you need to play 22 amazing games using these pyramids. And it all came out of that novel, because I started, like I said, it was this imaginary game. And people who read my short story were like, yeah, this story's pretty good, but man, where's that game? I want to play that. That sounds amazing. I was like, oh, it doesn't really exist. It's just like, a plot device. But that energy got me interested in trying to figure it out. And a friend of mine actually made me a little set of pyramids like the ones I described, which really kind of threw down the gauntlet. And even then, I couldn't figure it out because I didn't know how to design games at the time. I just, it turned out later I have an aptitude for that.
So you mentioned Looney Pyramids, and I honestly am not familiar. So I looked it up here on the old Google machine, and I've got Pyramid Primer #1 for 13 games for Looney Pyramids, Ice Dice, and Treehouse, and it shows a bunch of the versions of games that, like you were saying, you're going to play. And then John brought something up that makes me ask a question.
Yeah, I have to wonder this.
Were you by any was Looney Pyramids by any chance the inspiration?
Cones of Dunshire. Yeah, I knew you were going there.
Park and Recreation. Ben Wyatt's game, The Cones of Dunshire.
It's all about the cones. Yes, of course. I'm familiar with that. As a matter of fact, the Cones of Dunshire game, there's a real, it's ridiculously complicated, but there is a real game at the backbone of all that, which was designed by some friends of mine who work at actually, I guess it's a defunct company now, but Mayfair Games.
Oh, Mayfair, yeah.
Yeah, they actually consulted on that.
No kidding.
And when they were putting together a fake game for Parks and Rec, they were invoking all kind of different game, like parts from lots of different games, and they even were using our pyramids as little stand-ins for the codes when they were playtesting it. But that said, I'm not sure really what came. I mean, the pyramids have been around for decades, so it certainly seems like there may have been some spark to that inspiration. But I've never really gotten the inside scoop on that myself.
That's a great idea to have like a system that, you got the pieces and then you could just do whatever you need to do with it.
Well, I always compare it to a deck of playing cards.
Yeah.
There you have a generic piece of equipment you'll find in everybody's cabinet that you can use to play literally hundreds of games. You just need a book of rules. So it is with the pyramids. Now, in some cases, you might need to gather up some other equipment, like some poker chips, for example, if you're going to play poker, or a cribbage board. And so with a pyramid set, you might need a board to put the pieces on, or some marking tokens. But some games don't need anything at all. In fact, my very favorite game of all, for anything, is called Homeworlds, which is one of the pyramid games. And it's an epic interstellar space battle game with no luck, no hidden information. It rivals chess in its depth and strategy. And it's one of the very few games I'll eagerly talk about that I did not design myself. And that game is so interesting and so difficult to learn, and I'm so good at it, and I'm so interested in finding people who will take me on at that game that I have a deal. Here's my deal. You ask people, what's your deal? What's your deal? My deal is if you can beat me in a game of Homeworlds, I will give you a medal. And I actually have these medals made up that say I beat Andy Looney in a game of Homeworlds.
Oh,
I think John's looking at John's the gamer of the group of the two of us. I'm casual.
That's what I want.
I want a medal.
I am trying to create what I call a gunslinger culture, where people will learn this game and then seek me out and challenge me to try to get that medal.
Oh, I like
this. It's working. Every now and then I'll get a challenger. And it's always so satisfying when I crush them.
So whenever we have game designers on, I always like to ask everybody. We've had a few on. What was it like for you as a kid? What was maybe like the entryway board and or card game that made you go, man, I love gaming. This is it, and this is like my absolute favorite thing.
Sorry.
Really?
Yep. When I think all the way back to my youngest, earliest game experience that kind of got me going, I remember playing Sorry as a very young boy with my mom. My mom had 5 kids, and she taught us all to like games because it was a way for her to kind of keep the kiddies occupied while still being able to she'd fold laundry or things like that while waiting for her turn in a game, and she could distract us with things like that. And I went for it big time, obviously. I remember looking at my older brothers with envy as they played more advanced games and looking forward to being old enough to try those games. But and I remember learning to play chess with my older brother who delighted in trouncing me at every opportunity. But when I think of what was my earliest one, it's Sorry.
I got to ask you this for Andrew. As far as games, board games like that, like Stratego, do you find a 2-player game is a little limiting, or do you like something a little bit bigger?
I don't know. I enjoy them all. I mean, again, that one that I raved about earlier, Homeworlds, that's a 2-player game. I mean, there are some ways to play it with more, and it's sort of interesting that way. But at its heart, it's a 2-player game, and I love it. And I've played endless 2-player games at Fluxx. There's a lot of joy in a 2-player game for me. But I like larger groups too. Yeah. So it's all good.
Do you have a favorite version of Fluxx to play yourself?
Yeah, I'm often asked this question, and my usual answer is whatever I'm working on at the moment, because the current one is usually the favorite in my mind. I do have a couple that stand out. For a long time, Star Fluxx would have been my go-to there because I'm such a big science fiction fan. And there we were kind of using the parody route to invoke so many different versions that are now like real versions. We have, all the Star Trek versions and Doctor Who. Of course, we don't have a Star Wars version here in America. That's its own story because I did design one that got published in Russia, but we haven't been able to get the rights to publish it here. So some of the sort of Star Wars stuff, you still got to go to Starflux for. A Russian popular company called Hobby World did the regular version and Zombie Flux, maybe one or two others. And then they said, we have the Star Wars license. Could we do a Star Wars Flux? And I said, well, we don't have the Star Wars license, but I can design one and you can publish it. And sadly, we can't even import it to publish it here. But if you figure out a way to order it online from Russia, or if you know someone going to Russia, get them to go to a game store there and bring you back a copy. It's quite the hot item here among the Fluxx community. The other one that's going to make fans drool is Rick and Morty.
Oh,
which, I know it just got printed in a Polish edition. So that one again, I designed it. We don't yet have the right to do it here. Maybe someday, but in the meantime, get thee to Poland, and you can probably get the Rick and Morty edition.
Interesting.
My God.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
That is too bad. I was
Rick,
thinking
Rick,
that.
I'm thinking of Rick and Morty Fluxx.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, it's pretty good. I have to say, because actually there's like various different keepers will have like characters who have catchphrases, like they'll be saying their catchphrase, and then there's the catchphrase rule that says you have to use that character's catchphrase if you have that keeper out. And if you fail, they can call you on it. You have to give the card away to the person who called you on failing to use your catchphrase. Ooh-wee! Or whatever it is.
Oh, that's funny.
I want to say this has been a great show. It's been great having you on. And I want to first of all tell everybody, go again to Looney Labs website. Check out Fluxx. If you're in a Target, if you're in any store, check it out. And I also want to give us all, well, at least me and John, credit for doing an hour-long episode where we said the word Fluxx about 1,000 times and never said the word that we should definitely not say on the radio by accident at all. That was, that was pretty good.
It's very important that you enunciate very clearly when referring to our card game Fluxx.
That should be. Is there a card like that in one of the games? Or you have to enunciate it properly, or?
No, but it's just always very important in any version that you do that.
It could be a very interesting variation of the game.
Oh yeah, we've had the awkward moment when someone has blurted out the name not quite right. Yes, indeed.
You always have stuff like that at your tables. It's you never know what's going to happen when we have a large group of people.
It's true.
That's definitely true.
Well, it's been a lot of fun talking to you guys. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, this is great.
No.
I really appreciate it. It's rare that we get a good, solid game design hour in.
And again, thank you for designing some games. Again, I'm not a huge gamer. I own 3 of your games, and I love them all.
Right? Yeah, he says he's not a huge gamer, and then he goes out and he buys all the Fluxx stuff.
Well, our games are kind of for the non-gamer. The hardcore gamers, especially Fluxx, they can't dominate it well enough. It's too chaotic for them. But
that's why I like
kind of lightweight gamers really get into it, and that's frankly who I really target my games at.
Yeah, definitely, and they're great games. I can attest to them myself. So I know you can.
Glad you like.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Andrew. It was great to have you on. Again, we tell people go check out the website if you're interested, and find Andrew and Looney Labs at the next event that you're at.
Download the Fluxx app.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Hey, thanks again.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
A great dude. That was a great hour.
Andrew Looney. Labs.
From NASA to Fluxx to Chrononauts and around. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.